Welcome to Westminster. I've got Calvin Robinson joining me today. Of course, the campaign champion for Defund BBC. How are you, mate?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. It's a privilege to be here.
Oh, well, not at all. It's great to speak to you again. I just wanted to talk to you before we do inevitably get to the BBC and the latest story over that, which I know people really do care about. I just wanted to talk to you about a few things you've put out recently from your experiences as a teacher. And there's just two things I want to pick up on. You said, first of all, as a teacher, I know white working class boys are the most disadvantaged in our country. You said to suggest privilege is based on skin colour is overly simplistic and somewhat racist. Individuals may experience many barriers and advantages based on a host of socio-economic factors. And you've also, again, pointed out you spent a career working in schools in London. And sorry to say you've seen as much racism aimed at working class white boys as I have any other demographic. Can you just tell us a bit more about your experience? Because I just found that really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's two massive areas to break down there. The first one is that, white working class boys in particular are the most disadvantaged after gypsies in this country. We've got a lot of people preaching about white privilege at the moment, and I don't actually think that is a thing. I don't think people are privileged based on the pigmentation of their skin. From what I see, the evidence suggests that we're not looking out for these disadvantaged kids, and the ones that are the most disadvantaged are white and working class, and they are boys. And it's because in that intersectionality hierarchy, they're at the bottom of it, the bottom of that pyramid. So we're not allowed to talk about them or help them or support them. And I think in particular, it's quite difficult for white teachers to address this issue without being seen as racist. And on the issue of racism, you mentioned the other part of that debate is that, I consult for about 200 schools in London.
Wow.
On behalf of the DFE, and I get to go into a lot of secondary schools. I'm quite fortunate in that aspect of my teaching career, but I do see, especially in London, especially in the inner city schools, white kids are experiencing racism just as much as anyone else. And that's because in London, we do have a lot of environments where to be white British is actually their minority. And any minority can experience racism. Well, anyone can. You don't have to actually be in a minority. But this is the problem, because they're perpetuating this myth that racism is only white people towards black people. It's a structure of power. It's systemic. It's not. It's just prejudice or discrimination towards someone based on their race or ethnicity. And we need to nip it in the bud in all forms. I see anti-Semitism taking root in a lot of our London schools as well. And that's because of some of the backgrounds of, where our kids are coming from. And we need to address these issues, all of them. It's not okay.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound good. I mean, do you think it's fair to say, in terms of sort of racism and prejudice within schools, is this something that is getting worse, or is it simply, in your opinion, or is this something that's always been there that you're just seeing the sort of modern equivalent of?
So I think kids can be mean. Kids are great, but they can be mean, and they'll pick on other kids in any way, shape, or form. And race is just one of the ways that they bully each other. And we're really coming down on bullying lately. We've got a good movement going on to clamp down on bad behavior, because kids, can't learn anything if they're not behaving. So we're really getting to the core of bullying. But racial bullying, I don't think it's gotten worse. I don't think it's gotten better. It just is. It's a part of school life, and it's one that we really want to get rid of. But the types of racial bullying have changed. When I was at school, I was very much the minority. I went to a all-white school. I was probably one of 2 or 3 people of color, or BME, whatever they want to call me these days. So I was quite often the victim of that kind of bullying, but now it's completely reversed. Like I say, in a lot of our London schools, it is the white working class boys that are in the minority, as well as being the most disadvantaged in their learning. They're also the ones that I'm seeing to be the victim of a lot of this racial tension.
That's really interesting. I mean, I just saw the latest set of figures that came out about, because, I think class is much more important, actually, than any of this stuff we talk about, racial divides. What the last set of figures I've seen, so it's had 12.7% of white British males who are eligible for free school meals went to university by the age of 19. And the progression rate has actually fallen slightly for the first time since 2011, 2012. But overall, it's 26.3% of pupils eligible for free school meals went on to university in 2018, 2019, compared to more than 45% of those who did not receive free school meals. So that shows you, in terms of wealth and class and background, actually there's a massive disparity still there.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. You know, if you're comparing Black African kids with white British kids, the Black African kids are going to get better grades, they're going to succeed, they're going to go to university. They've got much more chance of doing that than the white British kids at the moment. And that's because in a lot of our, you know, seaside towns or inner cities, there is a class divide there going on. It's not a race divide. And we've got a lot of working class kids that aren't being supported and aren't being encouraged in the way that they should. They're being kind of neglected, in all honesty.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear more on that from you, because I mean, in my background, certainly, I had to be a sort of, well, two things really. Number one, I came from a school where there was all different backgrounds, and the thing I really resent is that as soon as I've left school and got into adulthood, it seems like society increasingly wants to tell you that race is something that really does matter and we really care about, when none of us gave a toss. And secondly, I found that as a lad from relatively poor background, I had to push myself a lot in terms of aspiration. And we have an education system, I think, that because I mean, I went to a school that at one stage was on special measures when I was there. They seem to be a comfort blanket of the C grade, because they want people to get, oh, if you get the 5A to C's, that's in the... So what can we do more to encourage particularly working class kids of whatever ethnic background to really push on? I mean, I think grammar school's a fantastic thing, for example. I think it's a shame we aren't building a grammar school next to every council estate in the country. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I'm with you on that completely. Grammar schools are fantastic. I've worked in one myself, and I think you know, right now we have a postcode lottery. It depends where you live, which schools you have available to you. We need more parental choice, so we need more good schools. But one way of doing that is having grammar schools where we can actually really focus on kids that are academically achieving. Doesn't matter what their background is, doesn't matter where they're from, give them that encouragement that they need. But the other point you raised there is that, you know, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. And I think that is a key, you know, for all of us in society. It doesn't matter where we are. We've got to have some kind of encouragement saying you can do this, but also we've got to believe in ourselves and do things for ourselves. And the more that we're telling people, actually, no, you're oppressed, whether it's your class, your race or whatever, you're not going to succeed, or that you've got less chance of succeeding because these people have it better than you, the more we perpetuate that, the more they'll begin to believe it and hold themselves back. What we need to be saying is, you know what, you can do just as good as them. You can do even better. We need to raise the expectations for everybody across the board. That's the only way people succeed.
Finally, just on an overview of that then, do you think, is your view on education and social mobility that it stood still, it's getting worse, or it's getting better?
Oh, I mean, that's a good question.
Because I mean, I'll give you one example. I saw a statistic a couple of years ago from a social, I can't remember the group, but it was like a social mobility group who studies this stuff. And what it showed is that if you look at journalists, for instance, more journalists, a higher percentage proportion of journalists now privately educated than there were in the 1980s. So that's an example of going back. I mean, I'm not entirely convinced actually that we've moved forward in social mobility at all. I actually think we've gone back because of the lack of grammar schools, but I'd love to hear what your expertise on that.
It's a difficult one to measure because we've got more kids going to university now, but that I don't think necessarily pans out as social mobility, because they're doing, you know, all these kind of pseudoscience courses and gender studies and stuff that they can't get jobs with. So it doesn't improve their prospects whatsoever. I think what we need to do is focus on having academic studies and vocational studies, and not belittling or ostracizing vocational stuff. We need to emphasize the importance of this, especially in this country. You know, we need skilled laborers, and we need people that are talented in lots of different areas, not just university-based academic study. So I think we need to shift the focus a little. I'm not sure if we have improved or declined in social mobility. Like I say, it's a very difficult one to measure, but there's a way to go there.
Okay, I just want to change gears now, because I saw that you highlighted Joe Biden, and you wrote what he roughly said, which was this comment that he made. Quoting Joe Biden here, what you all know but most people don't know, unlike the African American community with notable exceptions, the Latino community is an incredibly diverse community with incredibly different attitudes about different things. And you said, because black people think alike, Joe Biden? I mean, this is sort of identity politics eating itself, really, isn't it? When you get these bizarre, ridiculous statements.
It is. What a fool. What a complete fool. You know, he's pandering to one audience and kind of disregarding another at the same time. Who writes this stuff for him? The poor guy. I mean, to say that Latino people are diverse and have different thoughts and opinions, and implying that black people don't because they all think alike, is ridiculous. It's such an outdated, bigoted stance to have. He's killing himself right there. I don't know what's happening with his campaign, but it's like he said before, you know, if you don't vote Democrat, you ain't black. What does that mean as well? Like, all black people need to vote for his party, otherwise they're traitors to their race. We're seeing the same rubbish in the UK, aren't we, with Labour and with BLM and all that hard left movement saying, you know, black people and people of ethnic minorities belong to us and they need to vote for us. It's like, come on, every single person is an individual. We're all British. We all have different opinions on things politically. Let's just not put people in boxes, please. It's nonsense.
And apart from anything else, I mean, what a sad way to look at the world. I mean, it really is a sad, depressing place when you sort of view people as homogenous groups. And all I can say is bring on those debates, because I think Joe Biden is, you're talking about this guy as the potential next US president. I mean, it's going to certainly be interesting to see him face to face with Trump, isn't it?
Well, I think it's a stitch up, to be honest with you. I think that what they're going to do is probably get someone to be his VP who they really want to be president, and they're going to usher them through and eventually say, actually, Joe's not fit to serve anymore. You know, he's clearly not well, is he?
Well, look, the BBC white privilege video that we saw put out BBC Biteside. I mean, as soon as I saw this, I saw your response. I retweeted your sensible comments on this. I mean, I'm almost lost for words, really. I mean, this is aimed at children. That's one of the most shocking things about it. This, and for those that haven't seen it, it's a video talking about the idea of white privilege. I mean, Calvin, what's your response to this?
No, I think they've made it quite clear that they want to take over parts of education in this country. They've said that, you know, traditional teaching should be left to the BBC, which is very, very scary because they're putting out content like this. BBC Bitesize used to be, you know, revision, GCSE revision, and nice, helpful flashcards. And now they've got this John guy just preaching at kids about white privilege, which wouldn't be as bad if there was an alternative view presented. And, you know, Andrew Neil tweeted John saying, look, let's have a different point of view so I can weigh them both up and see where I come to this. And John Amaechi said, no, actually, these aren't my opinions, these are facts. And that's very, very scary that someone like this would think that what they're saying isn't their own personal thoughts. It is scientific fact, because, you know, we can demonstrate that white privilege is a theory that is detrimental to young white kids, especially like we've talked about white working class boys, and it can be detrimental to ethnic minorities as well. It's not a theory that necessarily helps. I think they have good intentions, I really do. But it's, you know, it's like you said, looking at people as homogenous groups and kind of pigeonholing them based on the pigment of their skin. It makes no sense. It's rubbish.
I mean, I saw a story recently that said the BBC wants to do more in terms of the area of children's education, which I think, you know, after clips like this, people find deeply concerning. And of course, the director of BBC Education and Radio, as it happens, is former Labour MP James Purnell. Can you give us an overview as to what the BBC's current involvement is in education? If you've heard anything in terms of what they intend to do in terms of increasing content on Bitesize, things like that?
I don't know what they're going to do with Bitesize, but they have come out with a statement saying that, look, they want to take over more, they want to handle more education because they're using COVID as an excuse to say, you know, if people are learning remotely, let them watch the BBC, let them watch our content. And to be fair to them, they have put out some decent stuff, like I say, GCSE revision stuff in the past. But now it's all this lecturous, politically correct, woke brigade nonsense that is shoveling down kids' throats. And I think this is, I mean, I don't want to be too skeptical here, but I think this is a cynical approach to indoctrinate our young people to their way of thinking, you know, this metropolitan liberal elite's way of thinking. Their worldview is the right one after all, and we're all wrong. So why not preach it?
And finally, I just wanted to ask you, you put out a tweet saying, we now live in a country where an 80-year-old will find themselves forced to fund the likes of Gary Lineker and Emily Maitlis through the BBC licence fee. It is a morally outrageous state of affairs, a situation which all decent people should be shocked and ashamed by. I know that you're involved with the Defund the BBC campaign. It seems to have picked up a lot of momentum. Obviously spoke on this before. What's your overview on where we're headed with the BBC? What are people saying to you?
Michael, I'm glad you asked this. I'm really worried about this. They're attacking now the over 75s. They're going after elderly people, and they're saying that it's because they need more cash. Yet at the same time, they're spending £100 million a year chasing people that haven't paid their license fee and threatening them with imprisonment. You know, they're giving Gary Lineker multi-million-pound deals and Emily Maitlis the same. Why are they splashing out cash on celebrities and, you know, fat cat executives and chasing vulnerable people that haven't been able to afford their license fee and saying they need more money, and at the same time going after the elderly? It's really, really not right. I don't like to see it at all. I think, you know, the elderly have done a lot for us. That generation in particular, after all the generations, they've done so much for us. And then to go after them, chasing them, saying that they need to fund the BBC, which is actually not even addressing them anymore. The audience that the BBC is clamoring for is the young people, isn't it? That with all this woke content, and young people don't care. They don't want to watch the BBC. They've got their Netflix and their YouTube. All of it upsets me. I don't get where they're going with it, but they need to stop. They need to put an end to it, and they need to look after their elderly. I'm not saying that we need to all subsidize other people's license fees. I'm saying we need to get rid of the license fees. We need to have an opt-in model, or they need to look at a different business approach that doesn't force people to pay on threat of imprisonment.
But doesn't it perfectly sort of show you the direction of the BBC when, again, a lot of more elderly people rely on things like local radio and regional TV, not for political garbage to be shoved down their throat, but for, vital local information, especially in the sort of a time of an epidemic. And yet we hear BBC local radio is going to be slashed, regional TV is going to be slashed. Oh, but we have £100 million for what they're calling diverse and inclusive content. What is that all about?
And it's not diversity, is it? What they mean is superficial diversity. They want more brown faces. And they still don't understand that diversity means people with different thoughts and different opinions. And that's what we want in society. And I think, we've got hundreds of Freeview channels now. Elderly people could be choosing to watch ITV, Channel 4, whatever, but they still have to pay the BBC now. It's not right. It's not fair.
Well, look, Calvin, absolutely fascinating as ever, mate. Thanks a lot for joining me, and we'll speak again soon.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers.